Appreciative Inquiry, there is this thing called a 4D cycle, okay? So you had this definition last month, and we talked about the fact that appreciative inquiry is about my search for the best in the people, the organization, and the relevant world around us, and that I need to understand that the life of who we are is based on what we're doing and saying when we're most alive, most effective, and most constructively capable. Those are the moments that I'm studying, okay? Because you really are observing that with your teams. When are they most effective? When are they most energized? When are they most productive, right? What does that look like for them? So that if they need you to highlight that for them, you can do that. So the way that Cooper Ryder explores this is that he says, the first step in that process, and I'm going to show you the HIL process that mirrors this, it layers on top, is that we're discovering what our strengths are. We're discovering what we do well, okay? So we uncover and lift up, and I didn't even give you that, but I heard you all already using that term, okay? We uncover and lift up innovations and insights. What's there already? And this is a part of some of your initial work with your schools. We put them in a dream phase where they are envisioning what their new opportunities and possibilities are. What do we want to be? What do we want for our students, our teachers, for ourselves? Then we go into a process of designing this. What could that possibly look like? Now that we have an idea, we've envisioned what it can look like, then we need to develop an action plan for how we're going to make it work. And as was brought out earlier, our big goal is sustainability. So not just what will it look like, but how are we going to sustain it? So when you look at this huge piece, this is the foundational cycle that goes with appreciative inquiry. We layer that to what HIL has as their phase 1, phase 2, 3, and 4 action plan. So these are their phases for school renewal that you see to the left in front of you. And so the first thing that you would do, and you all are going to work and go deep into this next month, next January? It's January. My job is to introduce you to the SOAR appraisal, but here's the overview, okay? Is that for phase 1, do they have a literacy why, and do they understand their strengths around this why, okay? So that'll be your first part of your discussion with them. And when you talk about envisioning new opportunities, I want to understand what the current state of that school is, and then what they see to be their opportunities for growth, okay? And that will be done by means of the SOAR appraisal. So that's what we'll spend, that's what we'll get into in a second as soon as I show you how to be appreciative, okay? So when they're presenting this SOAR appraisal, I think about, okay, this is our current state, and we're looking at our opportunities for growth, or our growth edges is a term that you've heard, okay? Then they want to think about, what is the desired state? My best possible scenario. And I say always go for the best possible scenario, right? Because if I don't envision it, I won't plan for it, right? So then I have to create my action and monitoring plan. So this is how the HIL phases align with the 4D cycle, all right? So the core principles of appreciative inquiry, why you hear us continue to work this way, is that words do create worlds. So we have to understand, remember we talked about judgment. Many of us, we default to one definition of judgment, right? Well, what you will start to understand with your schools, and what you already know about the schools that you've been in, is that there are certain words that are not going to be productive in certain settings. because they have a history with that group of people, and you may see that you want to avoid them, okay? And so I say that very seriously, because we've had some of and this is what we mean by, you all are going to, at some point, you will decide to make some integrity adaptations to the work, okay? Because it may be that there is, do you remember that one term? I think it was an accountability friend, or it was something, accountability partner. Well, that term didn't go over well at a particular school, accountability partner, okay? And so that particular, and some of you might say, well, what's wrong with that term? But this is about the power of words and their feelings in that particular school about whatever had come before we got there with regard to accountability and what that word and experience had been for them, right? So,
I just see it like a whole lot of heads just nodding, because I think they all know of one of those situations where you avoid one of those words. I would just encourage you guys that it's not only about avoiding some of the things that are within their culture and just asking questions about some of your terminology, but as you go through the HIL process, you're going to hear a lot of vocabulary. We do not hold so tight to that vocabulary that you cannot ask the teachers within the building, what does this, how do you guys use? What terms do you use? And that is completely fine. We are not married to the vocabulary, but we use certain vocabulary that comes from research, and it is absolutely fine if we're going to talk about success criteria or proficiency scales. It doesn't matter as long as we get to the end in mind. So understand the why we would talk about those things, and we can call it what they feel comfortable in calling it, because you just want to continue in that rapport with them, and we don't want to tip things upside down. We simply want to take them from where they're at and then tighten it from there. Does that make sense?
And so we've learned that in the first year, we knew it, but then we also had examples that confirmed it for us, okay? And I think that was sometimes something that was a concern last year, so we don't want that to be a concern for you. You know your building better than we will know it, okay? So you are going to think about how you best live and do this work within that space. So words are going to be important. So not only are you going to learn the words that you use, but we're also going to give you some appreciative language to use as well. And some of it is a part of your vocabulary. All right, so simultaneity, inquiry creates change. So the way that they look at this is the moment you ask a question, you set up an action, okay? So my questions are always guiding my group, my leadership team in a particular direction. They set a course. And so it's important that I am thoughtful about the questions that I ask. I use this example with the group often. Your child, your spouse, they come home late. What's one question you can ask?
Where were you?
Where were you? And no matter how I say that, where were you? Right? What's implied in that?
I don't trust you.
Yeah, she said, I don't trust you. There are some trust, right, questions there. What I thought.
Where are you supposed to be?
Yeah, it could be right. Did you know where you were supposed to be? Right? Depends on whether or not we're approaching them with our teacher voice or not, right? Okay, so I can ask, where were you? Or I can say, oh, I was concerned, are you okay? Right? The same question is the same thought is behind that. Well, I won't say the same thought. But the same question is being asked. But one might put someone on the defense, while another one might open someone up to say, yes, I'm okay, and here's what happened, in a way that, where were you, that we usually can't attach a really sweet tone to, might not Right? So words are, we see it every day. The questions we ask are going to send us on a certain course of action. So where were you? Do we want to have that conversation? Or do I want to say, are you okay? Is everything all right? Right? So it's up to us. The poetic principle, we can choose what we study. So this is about the investment, like the example I gave you in psychology. They get to choose where they want to invest their time. I had a fun conversation with my principals in November. I asked them about studying their data, and they were talking, rightfully so, about the group of students, low-income students. They kind of all look alike, who are performing at a certain level. And I'm just, running the statistic, right? And so they were saying, so we're studying da-da-da-da-da. I said, okay. I said, are any of the kids in those groups doing well? Are any of your low performing, low socioeconomic, not low performing, are any of your low socioeconomic students, are they performing well? Yeah, for some of them. I said, okay. I said, have you ever looked at their data? Like, have you ever looked at what supports are in place for them, or what the scenario is for them that's allowing them to do well, although they still have all this other criteria that the rest of these students do? Now, I knew their answer would be no, because that's just kind of how we default. Do you get what I'm saying? So this had nothing to do with them. This had nothing to do with their leaders. We are not necessarily trained to look for the few who are successful within a group of individuals who may be low performing. We are not taught to study what's going well for that particular group that we may be able to use as a guideline for how we support others with similar circumstances. That's just not how we're always taught to approach it. So there was no, and so then we went through this process of what would it look like if we were to do that, right? So this is similar when we go back to what are we going to study? What pockets of student data matter to us, right? So even though we have to be brave and honest when we're looking at that data, do we also want to make sure there's some doors that we've left closed that we may want to open that could give us some valuable information? Because if we never ask the question, we won't know, right? So then image inspires action. We'll talk about this in a second. This has to do with the fact that if I don't dream big enough, I won't plan big enough, okay? If my plan has multiple stages to it, there's no penalty for over planning, so to speak. Do you get what I'm saying? But if I'm limiting the outcomes or the possibilities for my school, then I do hit a wall when it comes to a desired state, if that makes sense, okay? So the image is going to inspire the action. If I'm limited in my thinking about what's possible, I'm limited in my planning of what's possible, okay? And then finally, the positive principle. Positive questions lead to positive change. It's all about the energy in the room that I'm trying to use. If I ask the questions a certain way, then I'm going to move our thinking into a certain way, okay? So these are going to be some of the goals of the appreciative leader. I have a transcendent core purpose and value. Some of you, when you were talking about this mission and vision here, you said, oh, we may want to make sure that they're revisiting that mission and vision. Like, how many people actually own that, right? And are aware of how that is influencing the work that they're doing as a school. So all of this behind appreciative schools and leadership is embedded in our principles, okay? So the positive strengths-based change, that speaks for itself. Relational leadership, how do I know this information if I never inquire about it, okay? When I look around here and I look at where you all fall on this continuum and I hear your stories of success and I understand where you've been able to thrive, I had to actively ask for this and make time for these discussions to happen, to know who you were and how to best work with you and utilize your strengths.
So given that, I was going to ask this earlier, but didn't. Do you recommend that we do the strengths list with our principals?
I think that you could do it with your leadership team, and it's going to be their decision as to whether or not they want to carry it into the whole school. Because usually, what we'll hear from our facilitators is that that's your main contact, principal and leadership team. I know you're not going to force your principal to do anything, but I think that you can say that and I'll talk to Pat about that. This is a belief that is embedded in our positive core, and this is one resource that we have. Some of them will say, oh, well, we have strengths finders and we do that, and now they're different and you interact with them differently. So you can introduce this as, here's another resource for us to really start to look at the embedded strengths in your team. So it's by all means something that you can use. My hesitation is, if they don't want to do it, then,
I would keep it in your back pocket
right.
as something that you're aware of, but keep in mind that phase one of the project is really about asking questions and understanding the context of the school, of the leader, understanding those relationships, trying to really get a better understanding of the school and where some of the struggles and celebrations are. And if there seems to be an opportunity for that, you have that in your back pocket to bring up. I would just be careful of bringing too many things in, because it will contradict some of the messages that we said around we're here to listen first.
You don't want them to feel like it's something you're forcing on them. What you will see in a second, we're going to look at questions. You all get to have a deep dive into it. It may be that for them, there are going to be some holistic questions that you ask that allow them to approach it in a different way.
I
Okay?
appreciate that context. Thank you.
So, whole system coherence. Oh, wait, no, that's skipped one. So the generative learning and capacity building, that speaks to what we were discussing earlier when we talk about our organizational learning, and then we talk about our collaborative ownership, okay? Internal and external accountability, that goes back to their evidence-based decisions. We want to make sure not only do they understand that they have all these they know that they have the state, that they have the district, they have all these different assessments, but do they have internal accountability factors in place that really speak to the learning and the understanding of their students that's most important to them, okay? And then the whole system coherence is the interconnectedness of all of this, right? So around the room, you will see, let me just move this one. This is the only one that you can't, and you have it right in front of you. Changing up a few things because I'm watching our time, okay? So over here we have affirmative, emergence, reframing, potential, and collaborative, all right? So, So when we talk about reframing, we're going to do this as a whole group, all right? It says the ability to seek out and study a new frame or view of the world, to be open to new concepts, ideas, viewpoints, and possibilities, all right? So think about that as an appreciative practice. We've talked about this pretty much the whole morning without even having this before us as a practice, right? So why then, some of you can see the next slide on yours. I wish I could have half the room have one slide and the other half have another. Click it on the wrong. So how can these practices inform our work, and why are they important for an appreciative approach? So let's think about it. Some of you have done a lot of work with reframing. How might the HIL approach be a little different for some of the schools? Some of you have had reform efforts occur at your schools. How does the HIL renewal process compare? Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna say, most often it's from a deficit model, not a strengths-based model.
Okay, so when I talk about reframing, right, being open to new concepts, ideas, viewpoints, and possibilities, how might that be relevant to the work that you all are going to do with them? Because what might be realistically some expectations I have as a principal if you tell me that there's a reform effort, because people don't always catch the word renewal, right? They hear school reform. They don't always pay attention to renewal, right? The difference, the subtle difference there. Any of these, the affirmation, let's look at that habit of seeing the world with an appreciative eye, translated into the ability to notice what is good, healthy, constructive, and life-giving in individuals and organizations. Potential, can someone else speak that one?
The ability to see the positive possibilities in a resident of oneself, others, a group, team, organization, or community. To believe it is to see it.
So remember we talked about the modeling earlier. I have to show them what it looks like and where it's present. Collaborative. Can somebody read that one for me?
The ability to invite, engage, and involve men in a positive way in a conversation about important topics. That includes the ability to create an environment where people are willing to share their thinking, listen to other points of view, and be part of identifying collective views.
So there's a huge piece to appreciative. You guys said earlier, you talked about the we and how the we was emphasized in November. So very clear that this isn't about the we HIL. This isn't, it's about the we HIL and the school and the district, because our ties, that's another role that Doug plays, right? You have to talk to some of those district people, but they're not gonna ask you about that, okay? Is that we don't just reach out to individual schools. We have district relationships or ISD relationships as well. So this is a multi-level effort going on here. So that we is broader than we might think it is, okay? And then emergent, to live in the present moment, to be able to improvise and be open to allow possibilities to emerge. Okay, so we will continue to explore what these practices mean, but this is kind of my operational mode, okay? I get to bring the sunshine, all right? All right, this is about how we ask the questions. I want to make sure I didn't. That's what I thought. Yeah, okay, we're good. All right, so if we break down simultaneity before we practice this, it's inquiry as an intervention. The questions that you ask are going to be your mode of reframing or your method for reframing. They will be your method for setting them on a particular course, okay? So conversations designed to focus on the health, the strength, and the wisdom create a move from confusion and despair to dialogue and co-creation. And that's our goal, because it can be in your conversation with the principal or in your conversation with the team. These are the 4 kinds of questions. There can be a high point. So this goes back, Don, to the question that you had. Maybe I don't ask the principal to take the survey, but maybe I'm going to ask this positive strengths-based question about what are we good at? What are our strengths? I might ask any of these questions to get to some of the information that we got as a result of the survey, if that makes sense. And we actually, there's a link, it may not be in there yet, there's literally an encyclopedia of these kinds of question stamps. And it gives it to you by subject if you're trying to ask questions about teamwork. if you're trying to ask questions about, what does it say? About data, all these different categories. And so that's what you figure out. Okay, well, I know I got to talk to the principal tomorrow about this. What might be some different kind of question stems that I could use to start that conversation? Okay, so in 6 years, what do we want to see? When working at our very best, what does it look like? How do we interact with each other? What words are exchanged? What do I see Bonnie doing? So what is it that we count on Bonnie bringing to the team every time that we meet? Okay? All right, we're gonna cut it there.